as you're talking about the kernel community and companies' involvement in the kernel community and ecosystem and how this all works, it just sounds like that it's been working so wonderfully ever since it existed. Now, my personal experience, both working for a company that was, well, not really even trying to contribute to the open source project that they were relying on, it was not the kernel. Um, it was an uphill battle, and I didn't exactly come out as a winner in that one. So like getting companies to even think about investing in the open source project that they are massively relying on for their products that they're already selling, it's not that simple. And then once they get involved, again, my personal experience, both working for companies who were trying to do that, as well as being involved in communities and watching other companies trying to do that, it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows and butterflies, to say the
No, I don't
least.
want to. I don't want to paper over that at all. It is not. It's an education process, right?
Yeah, I would love to learn how this all evolved in the Linux community, because I'm sure that you had challenges like everybody does. So I don't want to, picture or picture the Linux kernel community as unique in this regard, but I would love to hear how your experience was like being a contributor and then maintainer in the community, and then working with others whose paid job was either 100% of the time or usually some percentage of their time spent on the kernel upstream as part of their paid job. So how did that experience evolve over time? Like what kind of challenges did you face? Any common misconceptions that just kept showing up over the years that you have to, keep educating people over and over and over again?
Yeah, yeah. So I have a talk on here's how the kernel community works. Here's how the kernel's developed. Here's how the whole process works. Yada yada yada. I gave it once, I think, back in 2006. I was like, great. I wrote my talk for once. I'm done. I give that talk a couple times a year, ever since then. And I was like, after a couple of years, I'm like, why? Why do I have to keep giving this talk? And my wife says, well, there's a new kindergarten class every year. So it's like, yeah, you have to teach people keep coming in and learning and stuff. So it's fun. So it's an education process. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff interesting. So I'll call it IBM. I worked at IBM for a while, and I wasn't hired into the open source group originally. I transferred over. I was working on Linux there. But even the open source group at IBM was a very traditional company. And one of the rules of IBM was you could never critique another IBMer in public. That was the rule. Was just you can't do that. And as far as big companies go, that makes sense. You don't want to make fun of some other IBMer in public. I reviewed somebody's patch who was sitting like 3 cubicles over from me in public on a mailing list. And that was fine. He didn't care. But then I reviewed somebody who lived in another town, and they went and complained to their manager. Said, hey, you can't critique other IBMers' code in public. I'm like, was I wrong? They're like, no, you weren't wrong. But you just don't do that. I was like, well, this is how the community works. We contribute in the kernel in public. I don't want you just throwing stuff out of a company, making other people do your work for you, right? We've had problems where companies will just make me be the reviewer because they didn't want to have reviews internally. But this was just some education process. So Dan Fry realized that this needed to change in the corporate policy at IBM. Set me up in some funny meetings that I didn't realize I was being set up in, and taught them people that this is how the community works. We contribute, we're discussing code, we're not critiquing people. This is how things work. This is how you learn, and this is how you do this. You can't rely on the individuals, because when you submit this stuff, what if I wasn't in the building? I wasn't an IBMer. They're going to critique you from another company. This is the way the community works. You don't contribute code in private. We don't accept private contributions. We want to see this stuff work in public. So teaching the ecosystem of companies that we work in public, you can do initial reviews in private all you want. I really strongly encourage that. Take advantage of the people that are sitting next to you. But we do our work in public, and that was hard. That was learning. And then another one is maintainers. I touched on it earlier. Maintainership followed the person. At IBM, we had a new graduate come in and start working on part of the kernel because nobody was working on that part of the kernel, and became the maintainer. Did a great job. And then he wanted to move to a different division or a different thing. And, or he was told to move to a different thing. And we're like, no, wait, he's still the maintainer. Like, no, we'll take that maintainership away and give it to the new person. We're like, no, that's not how that works at all. It's his, and it's still his. He's changed jobs many times. And he's still doing a great job at that. And maintainerships follow the people. And that's good, because we joke, we've all worked for different companies over the years. Who are you working for this year? It's like, but you're still doing the same thing. You're still working on the same type of thing. And that's good. That's good for the product. That's good for Linux. It's good for the ecosystem. You have our depth of knowledge. You still have new people coming in all the time. You can work on that and rely on that. I'm not forced to go work on something totally new. Famously, Microsoft rewrote their USB stack 3 times because the team got moved off to do something else and a new team came in. They have to learn from scratch again and do that. I mean, you really want the depth of knowledge for some of this stuff. You can add new people, great, but just don't move the old people away if you want to. So teaching people, companies, that maintainerships follow them. And then when you get hired into a company, you have to be hired in such a way that you're allowed to work in the community. You're allowed to take that work on as part of your paid job. And that's been teaching companies. Companies have had to learn that over the years. And that's a management issue there. And then there's all the whole cultural issues. Japan, famously, I could not speak to you as another engineer unless I had met your manager, or your manager had introduced us before. Just culturally, I couldn't talk to you directly. So emails would have to go through managers, me to your manager, you'd send a patch to your manager. It just was not working. So Linux Foundation realized that very early. We started having meetings, open source conferences in Japan I've been going there for 20 years now, just to do that, to meet people, teach them this is how we work together. Number one, first, I've met you, so now you can talk to me. And also teaching managers that, hey, this isn't a problem. We need to change the culture and we need to work together like that. And then there's also some very good managers in Japan, companies, trying to change their companies to do the right thing there, famously as well. Try and get them to contribute upstream. Tell them it isn't the scary thing. It's okay if somebody critiques your code. It's not a bad thing on you. Famously, one manager was like, he's like, okay, I can't get my engineers to contribute, but so he did some documentation. He translated some documents from English into Japanese, and got the patches in. And then he's like, hey, if I can do this as a mere manager, what your engineers aren't doing? What are you doing? So, I mean, that he used the cultural shame in order to change his own company. He's done wonderfully, and he now works for Linux Foundation. He's a great person. But he realized at an early stage that you can use these societal pressures in order to do for good, right? And he did. And I have lots of other fun stories along the cultural issues. But sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's managerial, sometimes it's companies, but it's a lot of people issues. We're all people, right? So it's other people talking to other people. It's not purely technical all the time, because we're not all technical things. We have to deal with those types of stuff. And companies have to learn this. IBM and Intel famously decades ago said it's cheaper and faster to contribute upstream. Yet companies refuse to learn that. There's a Harvard Business Review paper. They refuse to learn that, and they want to find out for themselves. Fine, they can burn the money if they want to, but sometimes teaching them is good, right?